Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. You are once again at Ragnar's Architecture and Garden Travel, where we look at architecture and gardens from a standpoint of pure beauty or as a means of adding to your own personal Eden through either gardens or construction. Today we are going to look at Filoli, the Dynasty Carrington Mansion. We have already looked at the yards and the gardens of Filoli, which were built and owned by William Bourne, who owned the Grass Valley Gold Mine and the Grass Valley Water Company, and many developments in real estate in San Francisco. And this is a house he built in Woodside, California. It is very interesting. It's very large. It's 54,256 square feet. It has 56 rooms, 10 family bedrooms, 14 staff bedrooms, 16 bathrooms, and 17 fireplaces. This was one of the preeminent houses built in the San Francisco area after the San Francisco earthquake. Many of the people in San Francisco who had money looked for a place to flee to, and they built places out in the counties south of San Francisco and north of San Francisco, particularly Hillsborough. Woodside was not as well known. It was a little off the El Camino Real, and it was a little farther away from the railroad going into San Francisco, but it had much more land. This particular parcel was on 650 acres. It was a Georgian house designed primarily by Willis Polk, who was one of the preeminent architects in San Francisco. At some point during the construction, he had a falling out with Mr. Bourne, so they did not continue their working together. There were other people who were put onto the project. This is primarily a brick Georgian building with some Italian influence. Very rarely do you see a brick Georgian house with mission barrel tiles or Spanish tiles or Italian tiles, if you want to call them that. I can think of only one other house in England which has this effect, and it was more Italianate than this house. Typically, these houses of Georgian origin would have a roof of slate. Here's the back of the house and another view of the back of the house showing the size of this property. It truly is huge. You will notice going back that you had a series of Palladian windows or French doors on the bottom and some balconies up top with some typical square windows or French doors. You will look at the corners here and the corners here, and you will see that there are quoins made out of brick. That is, at the corners, it stands out from the rest of the brick facade. This house in particular was a Georgian design that was very restrained. Many of the Georgian mansions of that period in England or even reproductions in America would have limestone quoins, so this was a very understated piece of architecture, although you see the nice cornice molding up at the top of the eaves. Here's another example of a Palladian window with a rounded top and the divided lights, and you can see how thick the walls were. This was a masonry built house. Here's an extension that goes to the U-shaped corners that attach the servants' wing to the main house. And let's go back for a minute to the entry, and you see here you've got some columns that were actually structural and held up the roof to the entry covering, to the entry porch. And this is a U-shaped. Here's the wing of the servants' quarters. You'll notice that they don't have the extravagant Palladian windows or the rounded tops, and the rooms are smaller. As we look at the entry, You can see there's a slight difference. The main two columns were supporting the roof, and they were made of marble. The other ones were made from gladding McBean, and those were actually terracotta, glazed terracotta made to look like stone. You see the window or the doors there that go into the sides of the walls. They're pocket doors made to protect the main doors. This also has the Palladian arch on top. You can see the windows, they slide into the doors, or if you want people to look into the main house, you open your oak doors and you put in these window doors so that people can feel welcome. Up at the roof of the porch, which covers the entry, you can see an ornate piece, which is probably the most ornate piece on the exterior of the house. And this is also terracotta, which basically means cooked earth or clay. And they put a glaze on it so that it resembles stone. On either side as you come in the entry porch, you see a rounded piece out of stone, and you see a niche there on either side, and you'll see a bird bath, which is a copy from a bird bath found in Pompeii. In the entry hall, you will see a domed structure. It's domed on either side, and one side goes into the men's reception area, the other goes into the women's reception area, where they have a place to sit and a place to have a restroom and to store their coats. Here is a little garden room off the side. It's a reception room for people who aren't taken immediately into the reception room. This is a 174-foot long hallway going down to and ending in the dining room. You can see this doorway carved in stone, which has a pineapple above it, which is a symbol of welcoming. You can see the barrel vaulted roof, and you can see right where the roof starts turning up into the barrel vault, you can see a molding made out of plaster. When we get to the kitchen, you can see this is not exactly a warm place. This is not where you want to do your cooking. Of course, the owners of the house did no cooking. It reminds me of a house I walked into in 1980 in New York, in Long Island. It was a 15,000 square foot French mansion. It was an absolutely stunning place on 15 acres. It eventually sold in 1980 for $775,000. It's currently for sale for over $10 million. But as we walked through the house, my wife and I, as I was portraying myself as a potential buyer, and I was a potential buyer, but didn't work out. The house was absolutely stunning. You came to a point where the rooms were filled with magnificent antiques. The antiques were so important that the news of the auction of these antiques was announced in the social pages of the Los Angeles Times. So clear across the country, people knew how important this house was. And when we walked through, my wife, the lady who owned it, whose husband had passed away, she had a very famous name, and her maiden name was one of the most famous names in American society. She asked, "Well, how did you like the house?" My wife said, "Well, it was fabulous, but the kitchen needs a little work." She looked at her and said, "Oh, really? Oh my, I haven't been in there in 30 years." So this is the type of kitchen you had. It was mainly for function. You had a cook, you had several sous chefs, and it was not made for comfort. It was not made for looks. It was not made for family gatherings. It was made for the servants to work. The owners rarely showed up. Here you have the butler's pantry, where they stored things like a magnificent 800 plus piece of silver in a collection that was made by Tiffany's. And here you will see the call board, which had lights for whatever room was calling. the servants to have something brought up to them. It has a piece of plastic which was not original because at the time this was built, plastic was not even invented. So this was put here so that little visitors won't go around pushing buttons. But this was the call system. If you remember seeing in some of the old English mansions, they would have little bells. They'd pull their cord, which is attached to a long string, a long rope, and it would go down to the servants' quarters, and you'd have a ringing, and you'd take a look at what bell. This one here was more of an electronic board. Since it was built, finished in 1918, they did have electricity, as opposed to some of the old English. Here you have the dining room, which is at the end of the hall. Notice the Palladian windows, and it is paneled in oak. You'll see a wonderful oak floor it is made out of quarter-sawn oak, which has become more popular now, quarter-sawn white oak. The walls are paneled in oak. It has, and here you see a little parquet pattern around the edge, and this is finished in a neutral or clear color on the floor. You can see to the right, you will see the darker stained paneling. Here's another view of the dining room. You see an important carpet from Isfahan. That is a major sized carpet. You have an Italian marble fireplace. This is one of the other rooms, and I can't exactly tell you what it is. This has a parquet floor made out of quarter-sawn oak, and it is a reception room, again with a big plaster molding. And here is an example of the floor, which was not finished. They must have just redone the flooring here. Here's the reception room where visitors were brought into. You have a major piece of tapestry that was once part of Queen Victoria's collection. It resided in the Metropolitan Museum of Art for many years, and then it was purchased by the Bournes. You see an Italian white Carrara with red Verona marble insets in it. And here you see the green, and you'll see the green walls, the green silk draperies, and a magnificent, huge, absolutely huge carpet. And you will notice in the right-hand corner this major door surround, and it is on both sides, as you can see in here. It is on both sides of the room. Now, this is not exactly Georgian. This is Caroline. Named after the period when Queen Caroline was ruling in England. And for those of you with a knowledge of English history and a meter for BS, there is no Queen Caroline. Caroline was an adjective referring to Carolus, which was the Latin name for King Charles. This was a period right after Jacobean, and it was going into the period before Regency. You were Baroque, coming into Rococo, and it was very florid. That was untypical of Georgian mansions, which typically were trying to recreate traditional or classical orders, and they did not overstate things. Here is an example of some of the plaster molding, and here's an example of some of the oak paneling. And here is one of the handcrafted sconces created out of bronze for the house. Here again, from the inside, you're seeing the French doors on the main floor that are Palladian. Here you see a painted Palladian window. Here you see a more typical restrained and a more typical door surround from the Georgian period, and you can see the oak flooring in this reception room. It's a Versailles parquet pattern. Here again is some more of this magnificent plaster molding, which I have been using in houses because it is more decorative, and it depends upon what house you're using. But this used to be prevalent. It costs a lot of money, but they actually come in pieces precast. And there again, you see that big Caroline door surround looking into the library. And here it is. This is not, we've got the fluted columns with Corinthian capitals, a major tympanum, and you've got these very florid uh, rolled tops. Here again, sorry for the fuzziness of the picture. Here's another example of of a different plaster molding. Another one, and here's the library. This is made of black walnut. The paneling, American black walnut, and the molding is all out of wood going up to the flat roof. You will see they had, and here you just have a piece, another marble fireplace. An example, if you look at the right of some of the major carvings on some of the panel frames. And at the end of the north end of the hall, the other main hall went to the south. This one is from the north, and it ends in the staircase, which is bronze and wrought iron, and with a wooden rail, it goes up to the second floor. Visitors are not allowed up to the second floor. It used to have the bedrooms, master bedrooms, and they're now used for offices, so you would not be impressed by what you would see anyway. It's similar to a lot of the major houses. Here you have another door surround with some carving around the panels and around the frames, casings around the door. And here is just another example of a Palladian window at the end, a little crooked. That's my photography, not the house. In this, this is called the trophy room. It used to be a billiard room and or a reception room where women could go. I forget which one, to tell you the truth. But you can take a look at the columns, out of the fluted columns with capitals, nice bases on the capitals or on the columns. You can see the central portion there is undoubtedly a veneer. As you can see, the patterns in the oak. It has a beautiful marble fireplace again. And here inside they have a door. This used to be the safe where he would keep some of the gold that came from the mine, and he would lock it in here. It's now used for storing wine bottles. Here's another door where they actually had stored some wine, and they had a fridge. It was tucked into the paneling, and if you didn't know it was there, you probably wouldn't find it. Here you can see the wood on the left is actually a big wood shutter. You can see some double windows. They did not do much in the double pane glass back then, so they actually did double doors. And you can see the handhold in the middle, which would slide the door open. Here's an example in the corners of the double fluted square columns and some of the moldings up top. You can see they even did paneling in between the columns. They didn't just put a solid piece of wood, they actually did panels. Here's a reception room on the main floor, another reception room on the main floor. And here's an example of the baths they had in this house. You can see they actually had raised paneled marble for a wainscot around the walls, which is something which today you would see a lot of in China when they're building new mansions. The rest of the houses in China are awful, but they have magnificent marble and granite work. Here you see a granite top, and you see a marble top and a marble floor. And this was a bathroom for use on the main floor. It was just a powder room. And at the end of the north wing of the house, you come to the ballroom, which was 70 feet long, 32 feet wide. You have some paintings on the left side. You can see there it is a painting of the Muckross house, which was an 11,000 square foot estate in Ireland that Mr. Bourne gave to his daughter as a wedding present. You will see the dais in the background, which is a platform for music. You have a piano up there. It is a place for the band to play. And here's the very ornate marble, French marble fireplace with some ormolu decorations on it. And you can see some of the some of the handcrafted sconces that are on the walls. You'll notice it's green painted. It does cost less to paint. And today, instead of doing something like poplar, you typically would do paneling that's going to be painted out of MDF because it does not shrink and you don't get cracks around the edges of the paneling. Here you can see a storage door that has mirrored windows up at the end of the dais. Here you can see steps up to the dais where the orchestra would perform. You can take a look at the ornate plaster ceiling up above, and you can see the gold leaf at the tops of the capitals and on some of the plaster columns. I did a major house in La Cañada Flint Ridge that we did the same thing. We went to the capitals and did a little bit of relief on gold leaf on the capitals and some of the moldings. The owner liked it so much that he put gold leaf on everything, which sometimes a little is more than a lot, and it frankly was overdone. So here's looking at the other end of the ballroom, and you can see once again the moldings, and you can see the size of that fireplace. Some of the women there could actually walk into the fireplace. And here again, you can see the paintings on the wall, the murals on the walls that were actually put onto canvas. And here's just a little door surround going out. Here's another bathroom where you can see the details of the marble work. It looks like you've got 8x8 tiles, 8-inch by 8-inch tiles on the floor, which are not particularly impressive, but the wainscot really is impressive. And it's all old fashioned, but at the time you probably have gold plated fixtures on the faucets. And at the small mirror, small window, at the time, that was the height of fashion. And there we are. We have gone through the Carrington mansion, Filoli, and it has the main rooms and it has the most magnificent gardens. And so thank you for coming. These are not exactly the halcyon days of travel, but we will do what we can. Thank you.